wondering, would you say that it's smart to have an SOP and how to write an SOP, or is that a little bit of an overkill?
I think you should have an SOP on how to write an SOP.
If you've ever felt like you're drowning in busy work or babysitting your business instead of leading it, you're in the right place. I'm Laura, a no-code consultant, systems strategist, and founder of Proprium. And each week I sit down with founders, operators, and experts who know what it really takes to scale sustainably without burning out. This episode of Systems with Laura is brought to you by Proprium, business workflow and automation agency. If you're building a service-based business and you're overwhelmed by operations, automations, or choosing the right tools, this is exactly what Proprium helps with. Proprium builds systems that help you save time, reduce repetitive work, and scale without chaos. Learn more at proprium.agency. My guest today is someone who doesn't just help you clean up the mess behind the scenes, she helps you lead like you were always meant to. Andrea is the fractional COO that women entrepreneurs call when their so called success starts feeling like a trap. With over 15 years in HR, business continuity, and team leadership, she has a gift for spotting both the $1 million vision and the hidden dumpster fires happening behind the scenes. She is the creator of the Scale Method and the Seamless Team, two frameworks that help founders stop micromanaging and start leading. She's the secret weapon behind established businesses, and they call her when they are tired of doing it all and ready to reclaim their time, their revenue, and yes, even their weekends. So I'm going to say hi to Andrea. Hi, and thank you for being my guest today.
Hi, Laura. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm happy to be here.
So, could you tell a little bit about yourself to the audience, just to add to the intro that I had, but a little bit with your own experience and why you do what you do currently?
Sure. I'm a fractional COO who helps women led business owners scale with clarity, confidence, aligned teams, and a solid plan. So, a little bit about my background and how this all came to be, very briefly, because it's a 13-year story. About
We have
13
time.
years.
We have time.
I used to work at a big corporate company, which was amazing at the time. I eventually became the business continuity leader there. If you don't know what that is, many people don't. You're basically constantly planning for disasters. And so if something happens to the business, you need a plan in place to make sure the business can keep running. We had companies all over Canada, so I was rolling out this brand new program and training leaders and managers in all departments to make sure it wasn't total panic mode if everything went down. And it did a couple of times. We had hurricanes and we had power outages and we had systems go down, but we were all good. Eventually, I left there about 13 years ago. My husband and I picked up, moved out of the city into the country. Well, here we call it around the bay or by the water. Quit our corporate jobs, moved to a house in the trees, or is what I call it. I hung up my high heels and now I'm wearing hiking boots. Eventually, the mini corporate world came calling and I went to work with a tech startup, which was also great. So I was with them for a few years. I eventually became their HR manager somehow. Still don't know how that happened. Still think they Jedi mind tricked me there somewhere. But it was so great because I got to build the program from the ground up. We grew the team from about 12 people to 30 while I was there. I put all of that in place and put a bow on it and said, here you go. It's time for me to finally go out on my own. It just kept calling and calling and calling. I said, okay, it's time. To the freelance life, I was a VA, then an OBM, and then this year I changed it up a bit more because it always, no matter what role I was in, the strategic part of me kept coming out. And then the CEOs I was working with wanted the help. So I started doing more strategizing with them. So then I switched it this year to be more of a fractional COO and strategic business partner. So I took my years of operational experience, my business continuity experience, my leadership experience, and HR, packaged it all together, and here we are.
So that's a very interesting story. When we first had a conversation, I had a feeling like you're trained to basically see disaster in making. So you can like scan a business in a way, and then you can see these are the leaks, this is what's happening. And I am pretty sure that you can also detect in the first conversation with an entrepreneur, basically, what are some of the things that could be an issue. So how did you kind of cultivate that superpower, and how do you use it in the fractional COO service that you offer?
I think it comes from my experience with working with many different CEOs at many different levels. So I worked with a really big company, I worked with a small, medium-sized company, and then I was working with entrepreneurs who were either still solopreneurs or had a team of, 3 to 6 people. So I got to know their frustrations, their experiences, and what I noticed was it doesn't matter what level you're at, you all have the same concerns and you all have the same issues that you're dealing with, whether it's just plain old overwhelm. What do I do? Where do I put my focus? My team is driving me crazy. I don't have the right people in place. I don't want to, I hire the wrong people all the time. I don't have any systems in place, or my systems are broken. Why isn't this working? How come I can't scale? I'm doing all the things, but nothing is working. So I think that's kind of where the connection was made. It doesn't matter what level you're at. Doesn't matter what kind of company you're running. We're all dealing with the same issues.
So what would be, top 5 signs somebody's completely drowning in their business and they need your service?
Oh, top 5. Oh dear, if you have 5, you really need me. Top 5 signs. Definitely overwhelm. Definitely. And overwhelm comes in so many different categories, but I always feel like overwhelm, and even for myself, I've, especially lately, the past year or so since going out and freelance, I've seen overwhelm is you're on the verge of tears. That's when I kind of step in and try to give them the big vision again of, yes, I completely understand that these 200 things need to be done. They don't need to be done tomorrow. They're not all going to move the needle in your business. So overwhelm and unfortunately tears. However, when I do see the tears and we have our chat and I do my pep talk, I do love to see the relief. Just, okay, this is what we'll do. This is what we'll focus on. And when I see the shoulders go down and the breath, I go, okay, now I've got you. Here we go. We're going to make a plan now. So the top 5. So overwhelm. We said the top 5 that they're drowning, right? Frustration. Definitely frustration, where they still think they need to do all the things. They either don't trust their team to do it for them, or they won't hire a team to help them and have their back. So overwhelm, frustration. Top 5. Oh, 5 is hard. You lose your focus. You're not focusing on the right things. You're not focusing on the things that are going to move the needle. You're going back into your comfort zone. I mean, I've worked with a CEO who had like a 6-figure business, and whenever she got super overwhelmed, she'd start designing social media graphics. And I was going, no. Yes, you're awesome at it. And yes, you have fun doing it, but you can't do that. Or I was working with another CEO who actually built physical products. And whenever he got overwhelmed with the team, he wanted to build. And I'm like, yes, that's your background. That's what you love doing. But you have a company to run. You have to do that, on your own time now. So yeah, they lose focus. They pivot. They pivot when they don't need to. They're not giving time to see if something is going to work. Maybe they, haven't signed a client in 3 months. So now they're going, oh my God, I need to change my whole audience and I need to change all of my programs. But you're not giving the data time to tell you if you need to do anything, or, this one small tweak can fix all that. Don't all of a sudden go, looking to promote to marketers when your initial audience was corporate women or something completely out of whack like that. And 5, procrastination and perfectionism. They stop. Yep, they act, they stop. They get so stuck in the weeds and they start to overthink, and it's got to be perfect, which means nothing gets done. I've actually worked with a CEO who I love. She's awesome. But that would happen to her. She'd get an analysis paralysis, and she's been in business for like 20 years. And we'd halt. And I would say, well, we got to do this, and let's focus on this. And no, I just can't make a decision. So that's when you're drowning, and you need a little lifeline to get you back up.
Well, those 5 reasons, they sound to me a little bit like it's also that entrepreneurs don't kind of divide the company from their identity. And it feels like that's one of the reasons why they get into those 5 situations that you just described. Did you ever encounter that they basically kind of base their personal worth on how the company is succeeding? They think their failure, and that also affects them leading the company? Or do you work more with entrepreneurs that have that distinguished immediately?
That's a really good point. Yeah, I do think, you can't help it when you're an entrepreneur. It's yours. It's you. It's your baby. So you can't help, it's very hard to separate them. I think even if you try, and even if you say you do, I don't think you do fully. So you're taking it a little bit personally. Maybe you're not taking as many risks as you would if it wasn't your company, or if you were running somebody else's company. So, yep, I agree.
I would tie that into my next question related to delegation, because from what I've observed with entrepreneurs in my 7+ years of business, is that they also, and let's not, say that maybe I'm one of those people, but, maybe just let's say I'm asking for a friend, but I feel that the delegation problems, tie into the people not being able to replicate what you can do, and then you kind of start resenting them until you learn that that's not an objective evaluation or expectation, until you work with coaches, until you work for a longer time, and then you realize that maybe not one person can replace you, but 5 people can replace you in certain aspects. So how do you deal with that? And let's tie that into the virtual assistant, OBM, and now fractional COO, because you probably observed that in all those 3 roles.
Yes, yeah, I have. And you're absolutely right. So delegation is more than just handing off tasks. It's about giving ownership to your team and trusting them that they're going to get it done. It may not be exactly the way you would have done it, but they'll get it done. Maybe it'll be better than what you would have done. You don't know. But if you show them how you want it done, open communication, feedback, then unless you really, really hired the wrong person, they're going to get it done. They may not get it done. If it normally takes you a week to do something and they're a new hire, have the expectation that they're not going to get it done exactly like you want it in that week. They need time to learn your style, or, you know, the way you would do it. And once, it's the same as anything. Once you start doing something, you're going to cut it in half eventually. So from what I've seen in my own experience, it has happened to me, and I have witnessed it to other team members as well. And in CEOs that I have spoken with, I've heard so many times that, you know, I hired a VA and she just wasn't doing a very good job. I had to redo all her work. So I ended up letting her go. And I would say, well, how long was she with you? Oh, just a month. And I'd say, well, do you feel that was enough time to actually give her, you know, time to learn your processes? Did you have SOPs, for example, that she could pull from so she didn't have to ask you 100 questions all the time? Or did you train her? Were you there for feedback? You know, maybe you didn't have to redo it all the time. Maybe that first, maybe second time. So I found people were a little less forgiving. I don't like the hire slow, fire fast, because it doesn't really give people the opportunity to show what they're capable of. However, I'm not saying you need to keep someone on for 6 months and they're just not cutting it. Then you have to cut them loose. So yeah, as a VA, OBM, and fractional COO, I have noticed if you're, and you'll probably hear me say this a lot depending on what we're talking about today, if you're not onboarded properly, and if you don't have a clear job description, you're always going to run into stuff like this. You need to have clear job description so you know, and your new hire knows exactly what's expected of them. And just because they know their stuff, maybe they're so awesome, but they don't know your processes yet. You can't just throw them in the deep end and say, well, you're an OBM, you know how to do this. Maybe they do, but they don't know how you do it. So yeah, it's hiring and onboarding is super, super, super important to get the right hire and get the job done, have them off and running, their ownership, they got it, they can take care of it. They don't need to bother you at all. A personal example, I actually got hired as an OBM. It was great, so excited. It was an industry I love to work in, and she didn't have a job description. But I was so interested in the position, I was like, okay, obviously she knows what she needs, and, you know, we'll figure this out, and off we go. 2 months together, and we were still trying to figure out why I was there. So she didn't have a clear idea of what she wanted me to do. I explained everything I could help her with, but there was just this disconnect because I think she was told she needed an OBM, wasn't exactly sure what an OBM did. So unfortunately that didn't work out. But lesson learned on both of our ends, where it should start with a clear job description and awesome, awesome, awesome onboarding.
I definitely agree with that. And I think it's a really good place to kind of, in this part of the podcast, to clarify what is a virtual assistant, what is an OBM, what's a fractional COO. You know, when do you hire each? Why?
Okay, so I have a kind of like against the norm policy on that. So before I give you my against the norm, a virtual assistant to me, and I'll give you my definitions because maybe everybody has their own. So a virtual assistant to me is a doer. They're there to help you get the tasks off your list. So that could be your inbox management, scheduling your content, could be graphic design. Even I know some virtual assistants are awesome at graphic design. So it's taking those kind of things off your plate so you don't have to deal with that anymore. The OBMs when I was an OBM was more of it's a project manager, but different because they are managing your projects, so you don't have to. Sometimes they're managing your team, even depending on what you need from them. So I call them the middle person. It's you, then it's them. They're kind of taking care of everything. So you don't have to take care of every tiny detail. You just have to take care of everything above what they're looking after for you. So they would take care of the projects, possibly the team, if that's what you wanted to do. And some of them even help with strategic thinking. I did. And I know some OBMs don't help with tasks. I did, just because I couldn't help myself. And you just want to help all the time. Like, I have a copywriting background, so if they ever needed help with copywriting, I would always raise my hand for that. It's just, I can't help it. And then the fractional COO, that's your strategic partner. I'm here to help get you out of the weeds, help get you focused on what's actually going to move the needle. I'm not necessarily there to implement anything for you, although that is a possibility, once we work together and see what the picture is. So what I do in the scale method is we spend a day together. We go through the 6 main areas of your business. I will identify the top 3 gaps, and then we come up with a 30, 60, 90-day plan. That's it. We are focusing on 3 for 90 days. That's it. Everything else goes into the parking lot. We can pick that out next quarter. So, and for those who aren't familiar with fractional COO, I like to say it's your executive in your back pocket. So being fractional is you don't need to spend the money on a full-time hire. So for me, it's usually where I do the quarterly planning mostly. It would be, say we were going to work together. And you're like, oh my God, Andrea, help, I'm drowning. I need your help. So we'd sit down, we'd figure it all out. And like I said, if I'm always there for the 30 days afterwards to help. Any questions? I'm not going to go, this is what you have to do. You're done. I'm not here to answer any questions. So if you're good, you have your dream team. You don't need my help. Awesome. Dream teams. That's what we're aiming for here. Then when the 90 days are up, well, I wouldn't say 90, I'd say 70 days are up. We get together again, review what's been done, and make a plan for the next 30, 60, 90 days. So I'm not a full-time person on your team. You don't need to pay the full amount to have a COO. I'm there when you need me. Keep chugging along. Okay, now what's next? What are we focusing on next? Now, as for hiring, I know most people go, first you need a VA so you can get all your stuff off your plate. Then you need your OBM. And then if you really want to, you go for your COO. I agree. However, I do find it easier for a CEO if you hire, and I mean, you could even start with COO. We could start together first, even if you have no team, it's just you. You could start at that level because you're starting with your strategy. You're starting with, okay, this is what I'm going to be working on. Do I need any help with this? Yes. Okay. Who do I need? Do I need an OBM? Do I need a VA? Do I just need a graphic designer? Do I need a marketing person, a copywriter? So I would suggest starting at the COO level so you know exactly what you're working on. You're not hiring as you need. You're not hiring out of panic. You're not going, oh, I got all this stuff to do. I need a VA. Well, example, I got hired as an OBM and because she thought she needed, someone told her she needed an OBM. She didn't even know why. And trust me, she needed one. It just did not work. So, or, if you didn't want to start there, you could start at an OBM level, and then you could have your strategy. The OBM could come in, maybe map out your SOPs, any automations you need, build the stuff. So when you do hire the VA that's going to do all the stuff for you, it's already in place. And your OBM or your COO, you don't even need both. You could just have your COO, can manage that person or manage your team because it's all in place. They can now run with it. And then you have a middleman of your OBM or your COO who now can answer all the questions. You don't need to do all the answering. You're not answering 100 questions from this new hire because they're going to have 100 questions. They're new. It doesn't matter what kind of experience you have. They don't know you or your business. They're getting used to it. So I do suggest having that middle person first before you bring on a team, because they can cut it off. And then you're only communicating with that one person. Not that you don't communicate with your team, obviously. You want a connection with your team, but it's one person running between the team and you. So you're not getting asked, if you have a team of like 6 people, you're not getting asked the same questions over and over again. And there's no miscommunication because you told this person to do this and you forgot you told them, and then you told this person to do this. And now nobody's aligned. They're doing different things. Well, you told me to do this. And you're like, oh, shoot, I did, didn't I?
I can agree and relate. And there is 14 of us in my company currently. Thanks to all the
You need a middleman.
Well,
A middlewoman.
definitely we have, but definitely I understand that, and I understand the need from the perspective of a team member to ask questions, because you're starting something, you're starting a new role, you want to show that you're basically, doing a great job, you want to get feedback, you want to be faster, you want to be of value to the company. But then if you're the CEO and you have 14 people that you have meetings with, you're gonna have a huge mental load. That's the problem. And then you cannot focus on what you need to do. And week goes by, you're exhausted. So we have that kind of sorted out. I am not overwhelmed by it. I can do other projects, I can work with clients, but I do have a fantastic team, and they're gonna edit this video, and I do want to give them a shout out. They're amazing. And I'm not just saying that. I really think that it took me years of learning what you just said, and working on myself as a CEO to understand that something that I understand doesn't necessarily mean another person immediately understands in the same way. That we have to have protocols in place, that we have to have systems, that business can be mapped out fully and be there outside of my head, and it doesn't make me any less valuable to the company, and it doesn't make our company easy to replicate or copy just because we have I always call them cake recipes, for everything mapped out. So how do you kind of explain that to somebody? And I'm pretty sure that you had to have encountered in 15 plus years of you doing this, stubborn entrepreneurs that don't want to change, but their business results are screaming that they need to change, basically, and they don't understand this yet. How do you kind of handle those conversations with them?
I actually haven't run into, well, yes, they're stubborn. We're all stubborn, but they're not stubborn to change.
Okay.
I haven't had that happen, actually. They're always open to change. Too much change sometimes. Like I said, they're pivoting too much. The hardest thing I have ever found to get them to get on board with, except for one client, is SOPs, standard operating procedures, because it's time consuming. However, with all of the AI that's out there now and everything like that, creating SOPs are so much faster. So once they get their head wrapped around, first of all, unless it's absolutely necessary, you're not the one that needs to write it. The person who normally does the job needs to write it. So if you have a team, so like your team of 14, if you have a graphic designer, you're not going to write the SOP on how to create your social media graphics. She is. So, I mean, if you're still the one where you have everything up in your head, yes, you have to create them. But like I said, there's so many programs up now, you kind of like speak to them and they write themselves almost. So I think it might be easier now if I was in that role to get people on board with creating that, because once you have SOPs, like I would preach SOPs over automation. And I know everybody is big on automation and it's awesome and it certainly has its place, but I've seen people come in to companies and they don't understand the automation. So now you need to explain, well, this is how this works and this is why this is triggered and oh, it's broken. How do I fix it? If you have an SOP, it could tell you how to fix it. And an SOP is really good for new hires to give them all the processes that they need, start to finish. This doesn't mean that you hire somebody and you go, here you go, you're on your own, here's your SOPs, you should be able to do this. However, in the pre-onboarding, because pre-onboarding is so important, and that's a step a lot of people forget, is that something they can look at before they even start with you. And they can come with their questions for their initial onboarding and they're off and running. So I think SOPs are super important, as well as proper onboarding, which I just preach all the time.
I fully agree. And as you know, we implement software, we set up automations and all of that at Proprium, but we always say to clients, you don't need to automate everything. This is not just because it's a buzzword doesn't mean it's going to be better, you know. Some habits, why change them? For example, if you have certain people that prefer pen and paper, let's not push them into software. You know, we have an Apple Pencil here, there's an iPad, I can just jot down stuff and then it turns it into text and it creates. So I really believe that software and technology need to kind of align with how we do stuff. You know, I always say your business is already successful and you're just using this to kind of make it easier on you, not to fully change your recipe. You have to make this complement you. If today's episode makes you realize your tools are not supporting your business, Proprium builds systems in tools like Airtable, SmartSuite, ClickUp, HubSpot, Make, Zapier, and many more. Proprium's team maps your processes, builds your workflows, automates your tasks, and trains your team. If you want systems done properly, visit proprium.agency. So I fully agree with the SOPs, but I do have a fun question. We're very serious so far, but I love how you presented yourself in the bio as the COO of dumpster fire cleanups. That really stuck with me, and I love that as part of your personal brand. So I'm wondering, what's one of the wildest behind the scenes moments you've walked into? What can you tell us?
Oh, wow. Now I feel like I have to come up with the amazing story. I don't, okay, this is not like a wild and crazy story or anything, but it was quite the dumpster fire. Um, I was working with a client once and she was really adamant about rebranding her website. The first issue was this is not where her focus should have been, because websites aren't as important as they used to be. I mean, half the people use ChatGPT instead of Google now. So, but anyway, this is what she wanted. We were working on her. Actually, I came into the project. They were working on the website. It was behind. So she was in a big rush to finally get it checked off the list. However, all the pages were not ready for the website. So in her mind, what she wanted to do was bring in as many people from her team as she could to help write the copy for the website. So she had 6 different people, including herself, working on pages for the website. She said, just take my brand guide, throw it into ChatGPT, and we're all off and running. She gave everybody till the end of the week. She did not give them a layout that she wanted followed. So by the end of the week, we had all these website pages written by 6 different people, different formats. Some had bullet points. Some were using story tone. Some were too technical. She had to redo all of the pages herself. She had to go through and edit the ones that were decent, rewrite all the other ones that were too technical, too long, not using the same format. So I don't know the cost of those. What did we, 2 weeks, probably went into 3 weeks by then. But she had 5 different people working on it. I don't know what their wages were, so I can't put a number to this. 5 different people working on it for a week, plus her as the CEO. And then she had to spend another week and a half redoing everything because the communication wasn't there. It's very difficult, even if you use ChatGPT. So I can't even, aside from the cost from all that, there was so much time wasted. She was so frustrated. And that's where the tears came in for her. So that was the dumpster fire of website design.
I think that also shows misalignment in expectations and, assessing the team and their abilities and her own ability basically there. So that kind of ties into my other question, which is related to what are some of the most common team dynamics do you see happen when you join a team? And doesn't matter which role, it could be also, the example from the corporation, but what are some of the most common team dynamics that happen because somebody doesn't have procedures and systems in place, and situations arise?
I'm going to answer that in 2 different ways. So if you don't have a system in place, there's confusion and there's miscommunication. Even sometimes when you do have a system in place, I worked with somebody once, we just had a small team. Our project management of choice was Asana. That's what everybody was supposed to be using, but not everybody was using it. So tasks weren't updated. Nobody knew exactly where some people were. They didn't know if they were on track, if it was done. Instead of putting comments in there, they were still using Facebook Messenger. So it wasn't a lot, even though there was supposed to be a system in place, not everybody on the team was using it. So there was still confusion and duplication of work, and during a launch when something was supposed to be done, it wasn't actually done, even though it was checked off. So if you have a system in place, you have to have everybody on board to do it. So that causes issues with team dynamics, because if you're the one that's following all the rules and somebody else is not, then there's frustration, there's annoyance, there's resentment, because you're like, oh, all you had to do was check the box. Like, what's wrong with you?
That's one job.
She was going, well, I forgot to check the box. Yeah. So, but one thing, I don't even know if this answers your question, but when you said team dynamics, it popped in my head. I always say, again, I just come up with my own rules, like the hiring backwards, start from the top. Hire for team culture fit. So I've seen so many times, especially in my HR days, sometimes you panic hire, like we need to get this done. So you just hire the person who seems like the best fit. Yes, let's get this done. That rarely works out. I've seen it done where people are really, really good at interviews and they turn on the charm, but they don't have the skills that they said they did. And I have seen people who do have the skills that they said they did. They're awesome at their job, but they do not fit with the culture of your company. So I always say, try to find the culture fit first. I know a lot of people doing hiring now. I've seen job descriptions out recently. They're asking for your like your Clifton strengths and your Colby A or like all those personality tests and everything, which is a good baseline to go by. Um, so yeah, I say, because if you hire for a culture fit, you obviously still need the skills. You're not hiring to totally train somebody from the ground up, but you can train them to be the way you want them to be, I'll say. But when there's like I've seen someone come in who destroyed a culture fit and people quit. And he was hired for a leadership role, which trickled down to people going, don't make me work underneath him. I can't work with this person. And I've seen people, I'm out of here. And eventually that person got fired, but not at the cost of losing some really good people in the company. So that's why I always go back to obviously skill. You're not going to hire, like I always used to say as a copywriter, don't hire me to do your graphics. For the love of God, that's not going to work out. Like, don't hire the completely wrong person, but hire for fit, culture fit. And it'll really help team dynamics because you're hiring the same kind of people. So you're building like collaboration and team trust and, an aligned team.
It makes me think when I started my business, and then middle of it, 3+ years, and now after 7+ years, I didn't know what the culture is, so I didn't know what I wanted. I basically, and I feel that everybody who just starts kind of doesn't know. So I really think that your advice on going with the fractional COO or OBM or a VA first kind of helps you because you have this expert besides you, that can kind of help you set it all up in a way. And then you can realize what kind of culture you want. In the beginning, I was going for something so different than now, you know,
Really?
completely, fully pivoted. I was thinking company equals an office. We need to have this beautiful place where we sit down, where we talk. That's the headquarters. The goal was one day our own building, things like that. I completely saw it wrong. And with all the situations that happened and how business goes and how the world went, now we are remote first fully. We hire for first culture fits for sure.
Yes.
Um, I
Yes.
don't care if the person doesn't know what they're doing. We'll teach you because the market changes so fast. You don't have to have too much experience. You just have to start with that correct attitude. So I definitely feel that, and I've made mistakes. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna make more mistakes in the future. I'm pretty sure that I personally was a bad leader at many points, good leader at many points. So it's nuanced. So what would you say to somebody who just started out, doesn't know what they're doing, or somebody who's trying to figure it out? How do you figure out your culture in a company when you're just you and VAs, or you and two or three people? How do you start mapping that out?
That is, I like what you said, where you said you assumed you were a bad leader at some point. Everybody is a bad leader at some point. Everybody. You're not used to it, especially if it's just you for the longest while. You think, well, how hard can it be? I'll hire, a VA to do this for me. But if you're not leading them the proper way, they can't do their job. And it just spirals. Like, even in my own experience, I know how to do my job, but if you're not communicating with me or leading me and showing me what you need to do, I start to feel like I don't know what I'm doing. And then I start to question my abilities. And then it just spirals there, even though you're like, but I know what I'm doing. And it's like, what do you know? Because you're not getting things done on time. So it's so hard, like mentally for everybody. And then the leader gets frustrated, how come this isn't getting done? And did I hire the wrong person? But yes, everybody, you learn your leadership skills. And I have worked with coaches who that's what they teach. They teach you how to be a leader. They help you find your gaps, your leadership style. So that is, that's out there. If you're a one-person show or like a two-person show and you don't know what your culture is, I think you kind of do know what your culture is though, because if you are hiring for a role and you had 5 people interview, somebody is going to stand out for maybe a story they told, or they were more comfortable, or, you just, in my opinion, you're drawn to the person a little bit more. That's your culture. So if you have a culture of we're business and that's it, no chit chat, get your job done, get it done on time, and that's what I want. I was looking at a job description a little while ago, and it said, if you're the type of person who doesn't care how someone's weekend was, or something like that, that's what they're looking for. They're like, get it done. That's what I want. And I looked at that going, oh, that's horrible. I always want to know how somebody's weekend was. So that's not a culture fit.
Yeah.
Like she would look at me and go, no, you asked me how my day was. Next. Whereas I got hired by a client last year who, through our email communication, so I was referred to her from somebody. We went back and forth through email a little bit. We were going to have an interview. She got sick, so she had to just reschedule until the following week. So we just had another quick email to say, yeah, no problem. Take care of yourself. She knew she wanted to hire me from our interaction through email because our personalities were similar. So I think you do know what your culture is. It just may not be something like, and I've built this when I built the HR program of, an overall culture. This is our mission. This is what we stand for. But even if you don't have a big picture built out yet, you know the kind of person you want to work with. That's your culture. I want to work with somebody who has my back. I want to work with somebody who has integrity. I want to work with somebody who loves deadlines and can meet them. And I want to work with somebody who asks me how my weekend was. That's your culture.
I love how you describe that. And I think that people don't understand that it's that simple. People think that they need to create this like big plan with 50 pages and, research and stuff like that. And they have to prepare. And I've seen that mostly in women. I think we have that, need for certificates and this, another, seminar and another, lecture, another program, another this, another that. And at the end of the day, it's just you piece of paper and just your thoughts. And you know what you actually need to do. You just keep looking for somebody to say, yes, that's correct, basically. I don't know what is your kind of opinion about that?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's almost like and I'm a perfect example not a perfect example of it. I was leading, into this direction, but I recently just got a few certificates myself. So even though I already had my HR certificate, I just got a hiring specialist certificate just to up the skills a little bit, which also brought on to strategic partner certificate and an operations director certificate. It was all part of like a similar program I was in. But that just gives me the certificate, makes me feel good, shows that I know what I'm doing, but I already knew that I knew what I was doing. But it's like we need to prove it to other people. And it's difficult to prove unless you're talking to somebody. So you kind of go, well, if I have a certificate to show them, that proves it. But it doesn't really prove you know what you're doing. It just proves that you got through the program and you got your certificate. Right? So, but yeah, I think that's where if I just learn this one more thing, but you just trust yourself. You know what you're
I
doing.
definitely agree. I also observed, for example, sales. When I was thinking about starting a business, I had this whole image in my mind, like this is how this looks. This is how an entrepreneur behaves. This is how things happen in business, blah, blah, blah. And then when you just start and you start going on meetings with potential clients, you realize, okay, this is just a conversation. Why was I so afraid? It's literally, hey, I know how to do this. Do you need that? Okay, this is the price. What is your budget? Let's see, how my service fits into your expectations. If it's, below the budget, I'll give you a proportionally lesser offer of my time and service, basically. And then we can start collaborating. I'm saying that because I'm very against discounts. I have a very I have a very very big opinion on discounts, just like you do on the which person to hire first. And I'm always against discounts because it starts the relationship fractured immediately, and it's a psychological effect. If we're not in the budget, we can just have a different level of service that we can offer without a problem. We can respect the budget, but I'm against that. So, do you have any business rule that you have as a golden rule that you also apply with your clients and in your methods?
I totally agree with the no discounts and just find a package that works. I have done that myself. Um, I love that you early on realized that sales calls are just conversations. That helps the mindset shift 100%. I had to teach that to myself as well. Um, I used to be really bad for not so much discounting my prices, but once we started working together, offering more. Like I said, if you needed help with copy, only because that's my nerdy jam, I would start doing copy, even though I was hired to help you with your planning your launch. So I would ask, oh, but you need your marketing materials written? I can do that. So I was kind of like the opposite of this is my rate, but I'm going to end up doing more if you need some kind of writing done. So trying not to fall into, I was giving myself scope creep.
I am not judging. I am not judging because my career sometimes feels like I'm playing with Legos. When I love spreadsheets, for example. So whenever we do a project, I tend to, overstay my welcome in a system, if that makes sense. And I've had situations where people love that. They love the added value. That all works until it leads to burnout. So I had to kind of take a step back and be like, yes, they're happy, but I am not kind of being respectful to myself or to the process. So I think it's good, sometimes, but sometimes it's a bad thing. But I've also had clients who were just like, no, make it simpler. Make it simpler. So it really depends on the
Yeah,
client, right?
definitely. Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like some people need more to make it feel like they're getting more, and other people are going, this is too complicated. Just tell me what to do.
I definitely agree. It took me a while to figure that out with people. I love the flexibility, and I love, to work whenever I kind of plan to work. If I feel like I should take a walk, I'm going to take a walk, if that makes sense. And I can do my work later. I am not one of those people, well, most entrepreneurs, that I can just like sit for 8 hours in an office and, that's my job basically. So I kind of assumed, which is already when you hear the word assume, you already know that that's wrong. But I assume that most people don't like that, but some people do like that, and you have to offer them that structure even in a business that's flexible. So how do you kind of, when you're working with a team, when you're working with the CEO, what helps them to kind of run their team seamlessly? What is a setup in a way that you would be able to look and you would say, okay, well, this team is now a great team. They're a dream team. This is working. What are the things that you would kind of detect there?
I would start with um, make sure everybody knows their role. when you hire somebody, you have to have a strong job description. And then when you have onboarding, you need to, again, reiterate what the job is going to be. So if you have a team, a seamless team to me is you have a team where everybody knows their role. Everybody is willing to collaborate with each other. Nobody's in a silo of, no, that's not my job, or no, go ask so and so. Not that you have to do other people's jobs, but you know what I mean. Then you're all aligned on the goals. So you're all driving towards this one vision. I like to do, yes, you have your business vision. I like to do, when we do our planning, you can see my pup in the background. She's having a nap. When you do your planning, do quarterly goals. So everybody knows this quarter, this is what we're focusing on. This is my job. These are my tasks. This is what I'm working on. We all collaborate, obviously, to make sure it all gets done on time. That's a seamless team to me. Again, it comes back to culture fit. So you're comfortable asking questions. You're comfortable leaning on people and reaching out to people. No stupid questions kind of thing. Somebody will get it done. I have walked into teams where the CEO actually had people on her team and she didn't know why they were there. Not just me, not just the one where she hired me to be her OBM and didn't know why I was there. She had other people because they were friends of hers on the team who didn't actually have a position. So what we did there is we did like an employee or contractor, because it was all freelancers, matrix. You map out your team, what they're doing, what they should be doing, and I also include their skill set, because if you are looking to pull for help or experience, you know where to look. So for example, in the copywriting example, she shouldn't have pulled from someone who's a graphic designer, or she shouldn't have pulled from somebody whose English wasn't first language, kind of thing. So, and then there's room for growth as well. It gives people hope. If they're in it with you, they're in your company, they know, okay, I'm a graphic designer, but I really want to work in the marketing area. So you start giving them, a little bit more marketing. Okay, well, maybe do a Facebook ad, or I don't know, I'm not a marketing person, but it helps you build out your team. You know who's doing what, and everybody's collaborating and working together, and they can see there's room for growth if they're in it for the long haul, which is what you hope for when you have your dream team.
So you mentioned something very interesting, a situation where a CEO had friends, inside the team. How do you manage that situation? Because I know a lot of my peers, whoever I talk to in networking groups or just friends that are entrepreneurs, we always, get to a point where that happens at least once in your business. I had that situation. I'm wondering, how do you kind of keep the friendship? How do you maybe close the relationship there? Or if it's a family member, and you see that you're not the fit, it doesn't even have to be that somebody's doing a bad job. It can just actually be you're not the culture fit, but it can hurt. How do you do that conversation?
I put it on the CEO to have the conversation. I have worked with CEOs who tried to put it on me, or, when I was in HR, that was my job, which it really wasn't. They don't want to do the dirty work, but it's your business. It's your company. It's your friend. It's your family member. How are they going to feel if I'm the one to let them go? That's that's just not gonna, that's not gonna fly. So you just be honest. Just say, you know, I loved working with you. It's just not working out. Or, you know, I have to downsize. The revenue is just not coming in. I got to cut this position, something like that. So I would just say it's the CEO's responsibility. If it's somebody that close to you, you don't want to ruin the relationship. If you don't let them go, you're probably going to ruin the relationship because you're going to start resenting them. You're going to start getting annoyed with them. You're like, I'm paying them to do nothing. Or, you know, that was the case. She hired her friend, didn't really know what she hired her for, but she was getting paid for it. So I think that's the safest bet. Less resentment, keep the relationship alive, cut your ties, and go cheers over some yummy supper.
So what you're saying is whenever you have to fire somebody, whenever you have to close any relationship, you better do it sooner than later, because it's not going to change whenever, you know, you get that gut feeling that this is not working out. It doesn't have to be that the person is a bad employee. Literally, it can be you're not a good fit. The styles are not similar, etc. And I feel like entrepreneurs kind of, you know, wait when situation is like that, because it's a clean cut when it's somebody that's doing damage or they're not doing a great job, because then you have, let's sit down, let's have a conversation, this is not working out. But when it's your gut feeling or when it's something along those lines, then it's really hard. And I feel that that also ruins the team dynamic. And just like in your example of that one person who made other people quit, that's a huge problem. How do you kind of advise, let's say, CEOs to prepare for that, especially when you're doing quarterly planning, you're doing, you know, planning for the company. You can't plan those things just happen, right? So when you kind of look at the business, and when you look at any of the strategy that the business has to do, of those three strategies, and something like that comes up, how does that affect the strategy and the situation in the company? How do you approach that?
Great question. Well, I would say first, if you're planning on letting somebody go, this just came to my head when you mentioned having to let somebody go. Prepare your notes for it. Doesn't matter if it's a best friend or somebody you just met. When you're doing it, be clear. I worked with a CEO before who, it was one of their first times letting somebody go, and they were so wishy-washy about it. The person didn't even realize what was happening. They didn't realize they were getting fired because they weren't being clear enough, because you're doing such a great job and this and that and blah, blah, blah. And they're going, oh, great. And then, you know, 10 minutes later, but we have to let you go. And I felt like just kind of like kicking them under the table, going, get on with it. So just be clear. It's a lot less harsh that way, even though it might seem harsh. As for planning, it's easier to plan for, if you're going quarter by quarter, it's easier to plan for knowing who you have to hire. So we're looking at a quarter ahead. Okay, so we're upping our marketing. Now, maybe it would be nice if we got like a part-time marketer to come in and help us do this. That's easier. If you ended up having to let somebody go, say like at the beginning of the quarter and you weren't expecting to, I like to keep track of, okay, so you hired for this one role that you just let go. Keep track of the people that you interviewed that almost made the cut. So now you have a pool to reach back out to. Maybe they're gone because they almost made the cut, which means they're pretty awesome. But you kept like these 3 or 4 names of, okay, so I just had to let my OBM go. Oh, now what? So you go back to, oh, I remember her. She was pretty darn good. I'm going to reach out to her, see if she still has any capacity. So then you can either, you've already spoken to this person, you already like them, they have the skills you're looking for. If they have the capacity, they can start. If they're gone, maybe go to the next person. But if you don't have your pool to choose from and you have to start all over, just don't panic. don't hire panic, or don't panic hire would be the other way to say it, because I'm more of a hire slow, but not too slow, because I have seen the good ones get away. So hire mid speed. So I like the idea of keeping your backlog of, and they could be referrals too. You'd be like, I kept my OBM, she's great, but this other woman that I interviewed, maybe your business friend is looking for someone and now you have a referral, and I'm sure they would appreciate that as well.
So is that a little bit of a uncomfortable situation? You had, I don't know, 100 candidates, you messaged them, you gave them an email saying, unfortunately, you didn't get the role, and then 2 or 3 months later, you call some of them. Is that an uncomfortable situation, or?
No, I don't think so, because if you really liked them, most likely you told them that. I've done interviews and didn't get the position, and I've been told, it was neck and neck. I don't know if that helps with the blow, because you're going, oh darn, I was so close.
Yep.
but it's better than if you didn't respond to them. If you just didn't let them know that they didn't get the job, I would not reach out to them a second time. If you just said, no, we chose somebody else,
Yeah.
and no explanation, I wouldn't reach out to them. But this is the tiny pool of, oh, I really wanted them, but this one just kind of beat her out a little tiny bit. Then I would say, when you write them that email or call them, whatever you do, say, oh, I really loved, your energy, or I loved that you could do this, but this one was just a little bit better fit. Then they know, oh, that sucks, but thanks for letting me know. So when you reach out, you're most likely in their head going, oh yeah, we did kind of click, and I do have some capacity. So yeah, I'm open to possibly work. Now, I mean, I wouldn't reach out and then change your mind. And if you did, I would not reach out to that person again. That would be a little unfair. But if you were ready, going, oh yes, she's free and I'm scooping her up, then let's go.
So I'm gonna form this with a disclaimer, because we'll post this on YouTube. But I am not an HR expert, so I've done all of my interviews, me prepare and all of that. I did 2,000 plus interviews, so I have a little bit of experience, let's say, basically. A little bit. Not too much, not the corporate experience, but in terms of interviews, I've realized my kind of recipes, I meet them first for 15 minutes just to see, how we talk as two humans, basically, just to get to know them in general. If I see from the conversation that this is a culture fit, then I invite them to a technical interview that's 30 minutes, where we talk about discussing stuff from their CV and what we're looking for. And then we have a group interview, where we have the candidates from the same category, basically, because we always hire multiple people for the same role. We never just go per one person when we are hiring, because we do a lot of project-based work. And we ask them to do this task together for an hour. So if you're, for example, doing marketing, you're applying for a marketing position, your task would be, as a group, prepare whatever you think is feasible for this hour, basically, just to see how they kind of communicate. And mostly from that group, 60 to 70% of them get hired, basically. And I've noticed, the first interview, the second interview, the third interview, the same person can show up in different ways. And somebody that I immediately liked, and I thought we clicked, seems to have completely different values and completely different answers on the third interview or in the group setting. And, if they're even rude to their peers, that's something that goes against our culture. I really don't want somebody who's gonna belittle anybody. So we kind of detect that also in that interaction. I also am very against the tasks where companies give you something to work on for a month, unpaid work. So I feel our time investment is, I would say, less than 2 hours in the interview process, and then we tell you if you're hired or not, basically. So what would you kind of advise me in this situation, if that makes sense? Is this something that you would advise to entrepreneurs who don't have an HR department? Is this a good method? What would you do instead?
I like that. One thing I don't like that you don't do, you don't do this, but I've seen recently where the job application is like a book and it's too long. And I'm not saying, like, people would say, well, if they want the job, they'll fill it out. And I'm like, but that's something you can cover in the 15-minute call. You don't need to make them go through all this. You can chat with them for 15 minutes. So I really like your process. I've heard of group interviews and I've been part of them way back in the day, but I haven't worked on a project with, I love that idea because you see how they work with other people. That is brilliant. I love that. The only thing I would say, a little piece of advice, is if you had the team or a team member, I would say have them do the 15-minute call. Take that off your plate. So say we were working together. I would take the first call. And then I know you, I know the company, I know what you're looking for. So say you have, 10 people lined up for 15-minute calls. That's however many hours. I don't know. I'm not a mathematician.
Really bad at it also.
But that's, hours out of your week that you don't have to do. And you just sit in on the half-hour one. And so how does the group one work? Do you sit there and watch them, or
Honestly, I do multitask. I really, and I don't like people to feel pressure. That's not my goal. So I don't sit and stare. I am
you're
there.
there?
I am there. I set the
Okay.
expectations. So they also know, and we have it on our website openly, our process. When you get invited to the first interview, you get a link to the article explaining what's gonna happen. And so you can opt in or opt out if you don't like that. But it's me, somebody who's senior in the team with me, and then we basically have a slide with one task explaining the task, and they can do whatever they want, whatever they kind of feel that they can do at that moment in that time. I basically tell them, these are not the people that are against you for the job. We are hiring multiple people to set expectations so they don't feel like this is my competition, basically, because they're not. And then they have 45 minutes for the task, and we tell them that they can use whatever they want, whatever information is missing from the slide, they can think of it. And it's usually something so wide, for example, a new phone. And you have to come up with which features does the phone have, what's the price point of the phone, how do we present it. Then somebody pulls out Canva on the call, and somebody starts doing that, and then they basically distribute tasks, and you can see who's the leader, who's not the leader, for example. So it kind of helps us set the tone of the expectation. I am not that big fan of personality tests. I love to solve them. I'm not gonna lie. If I see another Enneagram that I can purchase, I'm gonna fill it out. I'll give them my PayPal. They got me. But I really don't think that that's correct, because in some personality tests, you would have a certain assumption about me, and you would maybe think I'm too technical, but I'm very creative, for example, which I didn't know about myself, right? So I do feel that you have to combine few of them, like the DISC test, the Belbin test, the Enneagram, to get this layer of a human, to kind of see that. But still,
Yeah,
you
I
don't you
agree.
don't know what you get, because I think it's also this like culture, mindset, and what I'm aiming for is growth mindsets. That's my biggest. Yeah. What do you think about personality tests?
I have the same opinion as you. I love taking them, just to learn about myself and my strengths and this and that. And because there's times when you look at it and go, oh, really? I didn't realize I was creative or something like that. But I agree. I don't think it's what hiring should be based on, um, because you're not getting the full picture. Because it could be, I'm looking for a technical person. This person is showing up as a 2 points more creative over technical, but that's just because I may have given an answer a 5 instead of a 4. Like, you could actually be the person you're looking for. So yeah, I think they're nice to have, but if that's what you're basing your decision on, I don't think you're finding the right person. Maybe you are, sometimes you are, but it shouldn't be your be all end all decision making, I don't think.
I think it's also you don't know what's happening in somebody's life, so you don't know who you're getting. So on paper could look perfect, but maybe somebody had a personal tragedy, or somebody had a personal challenge, or they have a newborn baby at home. You don't know. So it's always context, I think, because you can label somebody as a low performer, but they're actually not. They're just having a little bit of a harder period in their life. Have you
Yeah. Or yeah,
or
a
a bad
bad
day?
day. It could be like, do you always look on the bright side? No. But 9 times out of 10 you do, but today,
Yes.
no. Everything's getting on my
Yeah.
nerves.
We are humans, and I think that's also something to take into consideration, for example. And I do think a leader should pull the person aside and ask, hey, how are you? And instead of like attacking, you are not doing this correctly. What we always like to ask in a team, not just me, but what we always as a team do to each other is like, hey, how can I help you with that? Because with that question, you literally get the context, because the person then says, oh, thank you, I've had a really bad day, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm not focused. Then you get that like layer out of them, and you don't have to point fingers and be like, hey, you made a mistake, this is, but you can also say, hey, you made a mistake, this is not okay. But sometimes the mistake is not because they are a bad employee and they want to do a mistake. The mistake is because life happened, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. Yeah, I love that. How can I help you, instead of going, this is wrong, or this is late, or this is not done right. This doesn't look right. And because that's not going to help the situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or having a good team where, you know, somebody feels comfortable reaching out, oh, I'm a little stuck on this. Can somebody help me? You know, or if you're not busy at the moment, who needs my help? How can I help you? Like you said, anybody, you need me to, well, like I said, don't ask me to do graphics, but I can help you
Yeah,
plan something.
I agree. I think that's also built over time, because by default, people are scared of other people's opinion. So, for example, when we have somebody new in the team, we always have this policy of write everything in the public channels. Don't have a one-on-one conversation. Go for coffee with other people if you want. Like, yeah, have a one-on-one on that. But like, if you're working on a project, put that in a channel where the whole team can see. And I've noticed that everybody's a little bit uncomfortable, and they're afraid if somebody's gonna mock them or anything like that. But it's the reason why we put that as a rule is because if you want to take a walk, or if you have a headache, or if you want to take a day off, or if something happens, you can just tag somebody and say, hey, I need help with this, can you take over? And they have context, right? So
Yes.
that's something that people don't see, because people point fingers. I do, however, when somebody does a mistake, I call them and I'm like, this was a mistake. What can we do about it? Because we have to call the things out, but we don't have to shame people for them, right? So, what do
Exactly.
you kind of suggest for people who don't have HR department, who don't have that experience? How should they kind of set those boundaries with their team? How should they kind of teach them that? How does this get developed over time? What is your experience, especially when you compare the small team and the corporation? You know.
Um, I do like, I've seen this in a few job descriptions, and even if it's not in your job description, you could mention it like during the onboarding, of be coachable. I find if people know ahead of time, to be open and coachable, that they accept feedback a little bit better. The feedback doesn't feel so harsh and, oh, I'm not doing a good job, or what do you mean that's not right? Because the coachable was there from the beginning. Everybody's open to being coached. You're not being told what to do. You're not being told that you're doing it wrong. You're just being coached. Unless, like you said, you actually do something wrong, and then you need to let them know that. So I would suggest maybe putting that out at the beginning, just to let people know to be open to feedback. And that's why, because we're all growing together. Even the leader, even the CEO, everybody's always growing and learning what's working, what's not working. The CEO's say is not always the be all end all. I've spoken with so many where they go, oh yeah, I never thought of it that way. Or just be open to conversations. That's one thing I can think of off the top of my head. I do like the open communication channels that you do, because you're discouraging people from going into silos almost, where one or two people are just working on this own thing and they're not really sharing what they're doing. It does make it a lot easier if someone needs to pick up the ball, because there could be an emergency. So even though, like your example was, I have a headache, I have to go lie down, can somebody take this off my plate and keep going with it? They have all the context there. They don't need to go, I don't know what that is, or now I have to go ask Laura. Now Laura has to tell me what's going on. It's all there in the channel. But there's times when somebody might just not show up because they have a family emergency or something like that. So somebody can just automatically step in. If you're expecting them to show up, say 9 o'clock for a meeting, and they just simply didn't show up, could be because they're on the way to the hospital or something like that. So I do really like the open channel. And then nobody's repeating themselves. Like you said, it's all clear. So nobody's going, well, I already told so-and-so, how come you don't know that? Or you just had 5 people ask you the same question in 2 days because it's not noted anywhere. So I would say start with having a coachable environment and everybody being open to coached, not being ridiculed or too much feedback, and open communication.
I like that, and I like the order of it, and I think that builds the culture also, piece by piece.
It does.
So
Yeah.
I'm wondering, what do you think people misunderstand about delegation? We touched on that a little bit before, but I just kind of want to put it in perspective. Like, what do you think CEOs in general misunderstand about delegation or leadership in general?
I think for delegation, they misunderstand it as just assigning tasks. So they're delegating something because it needs to get done. Delegation works better when you're giving your team members ownership and autonomy. So yes, you're giving them tasks to do, but you're letting them own it. It's their job to get this done now and to get it done right and to keep you updated if they have any questions. So delegation isn't just here, go do A, B, and C. It's here, go do A, B, and C. Now it's yours. You own it.
I love that. How can people make sure not to get lost in SOPs? So if you're gonna delegate, you should have an SOP, and then you have like 500 of them. How would you structure? How do you approach that with the companies you work with?
Good question. Get lost in the sea of SOPs. Well, I think if you have your SOPs done correctly, you don't need an SOP for every tiny little detail. So if you're giving somebody a task, there should be one SOP for that task, or 2 or 3 that branches off depending on how big the task is. So if you have them done correctly, then you shouldn't be wading around in too many SOPs. Have them linked. So if you have your main SOP, I'm trying to think of an example. My mind is going blank. You have your main SOP, and within that, the way I used to do them, I haven't done one in a long time, but I would have all the links up top. So I know some people, when they're doing them, they'll link throughout the SOP. So it's like reference this document. But if you change that link, now you need to change it 5 times in that one document instead of just once up at the top. So I would say keep it as simple as you can. Don't put links throughout the document. Put all your references up top and then link to whatever you need. So don't say reference document ABC and don't give them the link. And now they're going through the Google Drive or their ClickUp going, well, where do I find document ABC? So just link to everything. So even if you do have a main SOP and that branches off to another 2 or 3, it's still all there. So your task can still be broken out, but nobody is going, how do I find it? It's not named correctly. It's not in the folder that you said it was going to be in. Just link and put one link in each document.
Would you?
I don't know if
It
that answers
does.
your
It
question or
does.
not.
I'm wondering, would you say that it's smart to have an SOP and how to write an SOP, or is that a little bit of an overkill?
I think you should have an SOP on how to write an SOP. Because, like I said earlier, it's not one person's job to write an SOP. And it goes back to my example of the CEO who tried to get 5 different people to write the web page. If there was an SOP to say what it was supposed to look like, everybody would have at least had the same format and the same tone. So yes, have an SOP on how to write it so everybody's following the same format. Everybody knows what to include and how to do it for sure. Yes, I go down to that much detail. And I think you do too, by the look of your face.
I see it like a mind map, like a little web. And I think you probably use your brain in a similar way, because you have to kind of like see it as pieces of the puzzle. But yep, I definitely agree with that. So we're all using software daily. I'm wondering, in any of the different roles that you've had, what would be some of the softwares that you kind of prefer? You mentioned Asana, you mentioned ClickUp. What is your current tech stack, and what are the softwares that you would recommend for small businesses?
For me personally, for my own business, I am still so bare bones. It's not funny. I am still a Google Calendar, Google Drive kind of gal. That's how I organize my stuff. Everything is in my calendar, even reminders. Just even like the tiniest, follow up with this person, but a lot of people have that in their project management, in their ClickUp. But it's just, my calendar is something I look at all the time. So it's just there in my face. So do what works for you. My Google Drive is, organized the way I like it. I can easily find things. That's how I use mine. If I am working with somebody, I like to use Airtable. Recently is a new one for me because you can easily import a spreadsheet. So even if I was using a spreadsheet, I could easily put it into Airtable. I know other programs do it, but they're not as smooth as Airtable. And again, I go with, and you touched on this earlier, go with what they're comfortable with. Yes, sometimes they're going to need a system because they might have a team and we can't all be emailing back and forth. Or how do you plan a project if there's no project management system? That being said, I will never push, say I'm a big ClickUp fan. ClickUp is a learning curve. That is not the easiest one to learn. It's great and it's robust, but it's really hard for some people. I mentioned that to a couple of my clients. They go into instant panic mode. Oh, this is too hard. I can't do this. This is going to take up too much time. And then I mentioned Asana. She loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it, lived in it. So find what works for them. Yeah, I wouldn't push. For like behind the scenes, I'm only now building out my own funnels and stuff like that. So that's all new to me. I'm using System.io or System, I don't know how to say it. That's what I'm using
I
myself.
don't
That
know how
seems
to
pretty
pronounce
user
it, but
friendly.
it's Systemi.io.
Systemi, yes. Yeah. But yeah, don't I don't let them get away with being too comfortable. For example, I was working with a client who just couldn't understand Slack, could not get her head wrapped around it. She wanted to stay with email. And I said, well, we can use email, but we're going to have, for now, you cannot stick with email because too many things get lost. Things get lost in threads, things get lost in, like the emails get lost. And we're all just living in a sea of emails. So what we did with the team at the time, some of the team was using Asana. Sometimes we would use Slack. Two of the girls were really comfortable with Slack. So if we were just kind of working on something together, we would just quickly chat in there because it was a lot faster. But we would, if we were working on a project, we would have to make sure like there was naming standards in the subject line that everybody knew to follow. So again, just go with what's comfortable, but don't let them get too comfortable if something actually does need to be changed to be more efficient.
I agree fully with you. I have my own favorites for us, definitely. But the thing is, what I always say is you have to be able to move away from the software within one day if you have to do that, for example. And if you are unable to do that, then the implementation failed. For example, we've been using ClickUp since 2017. I love ClickUp. We live in ClickUp. We adore ClickUp, right? But the fact that I know that I can export within one day and just switch because our systems are in place, none related to ClickUp. Does that make sense? I think that's crucial.
Yep.
And then you can have fun with the software. And then you stay with it for a long time, like we did with ClickUp. So I think it's more of a what is your goal, what you want to achieve. So you say bare bones on the Google Calendar, on Google Drive. I hear smart because you are, setting up, you are one person team currently, and you just want to do the work first, and that's smart, right? Not jumping into how people get an office and then they get computers and stuff like that, what I thought entrepreneurship was in the beginning. So thank you for the recommendations. And thank you so much for this conversation. I enjoyed it so much that I didn't even see that it's an hour and a half already. I could talk to you
Thank
for
you. I
at
enjoyed
least
it
one
too.
more hour and a half. But I know we do have a hard stop. So and I hope that you also had a great time in this conversation. I think we learned a lot, and I really appreciate everything that you mentioned to the audience. So thank you so much. So basically, I just want to say towards the end of this episode, if you want to learn more about Andrea's work, you can check out the scale method and the seamless theme. We'll have her links in the show notes. And I really hope that if this episode kind of lit you up as an entrepreneur that's looking to set their operations, that you can see how these advices can help you and how Andrea can help you in the long run. So thank you so much for watching The Systems with Laura. See you next week. Until then, experiment, learn, grow, and share it with us in the comments. If you enjoy conversations like this, you'll love the Proprium Digital Network. It's a community where digital service founders get tools, templates, weekly insights, and behind the scenes guidance on building systems the right way. If you want to stop building systems alone and start building with support, join us at proprium.agency.